The calendar has finally flipped to March. Well, you know what that means? That means one word: madness. March Madness is upon us. It it hasn't even really crept up because madness has been happening the entire year in college basketball. If you could do one word for the entire year of college basketball, you could probably say madness, and that's even before March. But the month has finally come, and it is glorious, and we are looking forward to the pandemonium that will ensue come March Madness bracket time. We are going to take a deep dive into that, as well as this last week in the NFL Combine and all the big headlines that not only happened there, but is happening all over the NFL as franchise tags are happening right now, as well as cuts. And there are some big news that comes to that. But I am your host, Matthew Raridan, and this is Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. A long time no see on my end. I miss you guys. Hope you guys missed me as well. Me and my beautiful wife were on vacation. We went on a cruise to Mexico, and if you can't tell, I did not really come back with a tan. I asked the sun, turn me into freaking J Lo, but he turned me into Liza Minnelli or something like that. If you've seen the movie White Chicks, you know what I'm quoting there. But uh, yes, I did not come back much with a tan as much as I want to. But oh well, I still enjoyed the vacation. It is a vacation after all, so it is something to enjoy. But I missed being here, missed being on this show. All the guys held it down for me, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce my co host here, Ed Smith.
Welcome, y'all.
And if you did not notice, David Street is not with us today. As more on a personal side note, he is working on his career and bettering that, and we all support that for sure when it comes to bettering yourself in your career. So best of luck to David. But for the meantime, me and Ed are holding down the fort, but we always have enough to talk about because, well, sports, it never ends, it never dies. It's 24/7, 365 days a year. Something is always happening, and we are going to cover everything that we can. And as I started out on this episode talking about madness, March Madness, it's only fitting that we jump right into that. And I want to talk more on college basketball, and you could say parity or parity because both are happening right now in college basketball. It is pandemonium is what I used earlier. That's the one of the best words that I could explain. And we can only hope that that pandemonium spills over not only into conference championship play, but into March Madness bracket play because it's happening everywhere as we speak. We are watching an unranked Florida team who is obviously pretty good enough to be ranked right there in the bubble demolishing a ranked Alabama team. It seems like it's like this every night or every other night where we're seeing a ranked team go down or even a top three team go down. It is that close every single night, and well, I love it. I don't mind it whatsoever. As me and Ed have talked about before, this is stuff that we normally see in the conference championship play or even in the tournament itself, not beforehand. So if you're a college basketball fan, you are getting everything that you've paid for and then some. If you are paying for any subscriptions to watch the games or even being there to watch the game in person, you're getting your money's worth because that's what's happening. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Ed here: Is do you remember anything like this as far as pandemonium this early before even the tournaments go?
I feel as if year by year, the pandemonium gets a little earlier and earlier and earlier. Ever since we got past the whole one and done of college basketball, where more kids are staying at schools and creating better product for college basketball, we're getting better conference play. We're getting better out of conference play. We're getting, better just overall. This is a sport that is not like the league that they're trying to get into. These kids know that this is where the buck stops for their basketball careers for most of them, and they are playing like it. And they are playing very well at a very high level in whichever system that they're running. Because one of the great things about college basketball is the fact that it's not all this pro style up and down the court Lob City, Rip City, Splash City, whatever you want to call it. These are all great systems that are being run at the college level by great athletes, and they're doing a damn good job of doing it.
Absolutely. If I could think of one thing to compare it to, depending on where you live in the country, it's going to be different regardless where you live. But it's almost like springtime coming earlier and earlier every single year. The groundhog, did he see a shadow? Did he not? But just like
Yeah,
that, we are seeing college teams, the pandemonium happening earlier and earlier in the year. And it's awesome. It's amazing. I don't even think it's getting talked about enough, to be honest. Just I feel like it was just 2 weeks ago or so. I was talking on here about UConn and their dominance, and it's like, well, not necessarily anymore. Or where they're still up there towards the top, but they seem so dominant that it almost seemed like they're just going to go into the tournament and probably win again. But who knows? I honestly, who knows right now which team is going to do that? For all we know, it could be a San Diego State coming in there out of the blue and just wiping everyone out in this tournament. That's what I love about March Madness, but at the same time, that's what I love about this pandemonium ensuing earlier and earlier is that as if you're a bettor or you just love the game, you don't know who's even going to win the conference championships, let alone the tournament.
yeah, and the picture that I have ingrained in my head from this season is Houston, who is now the number one team in the country, getting road drug across Fog Island Fieldhouse just a few weeks ago. They looked horrible going into that environment, and Kansas, to their credit, they play better when they're at home because they have one of the best home field advantages in the country until they play BYU for some reason. I mean, it's just one thing after another that you look at it and go, "What? This isn't supposed to happen." But that's college basketball as a whole right now. Things that are supposed to happen don't happen, and things that aren't supposed to happen do happen. But it's the cream of the crop that will rise into the tournament, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and right now you have bracketology. That's another school that's a required, or another class in school that's required. Bracketology. You got biology, now you got bracketology, and you're seeing brackets everywhere, and you're seeing the rankings, the one seeds, and all that. And this is a conversation that I think me and Ed are gonna love having, and you may too as sports fans. But we talked about a couple months ago with college football how they kind of have like the favorites at the top, your preseason rankings, stuff like that. And it seems like for the first several weeks, that's all it goes off of, no matter how you play, who you play. And I feel like we're seeing that with actually one particular team right now. It could be others, depending on your opinion, but I see Arizona right now. And I'm not necessarily impressed. They were ranked number one early in the year, and they had a lot of hype on them, and then they fell off, and now they're right there, and they're above a Tennessee team that I truly feel they don't deserve to be over that Tennessee team. They're Arizona's last ranked win was their eighth game of the year. Since then, they've lost, I want to say, three straight time against ranked opponents, including Washington State, who keep an eye on them, folks. They've came out of nowhere lately. But this Arizona team, although yes, they destroyed, sorry, my Ducks, Oregon by 20 the other day. I'm not salty about that, but I still don't think that Arizona really does. deserve to be up there like where they're at. And is this the same that we're kind of seeing in college football, Ed? That you get these rankings early, and that's all they really want to base things off of, no matter your performance.
Well, nobody wants to be proven wrong. So all these sports writers put in their votes on who should be in the top 10. Well, if number 6 loses, I don't know, 3 games, 4 games, shouldn't they be out of the top 25? I mean, that's what we saw with LSU this year was they lost 4 games and they're still in the top 25. How is that even a thing?
Yeah,
And it all has to do with the biases, between the SEC bias, between LSU bias, the fact that they were pushing Jaden Daniels on the Heisman hype train. There's a lot of these other factors that people are thinking about when they're filling out these forms, as opposed to where do they actually fit. My ideal is, you start at the bottom and you go, well, if this team and this team played, would this team beat them? Yes, then they get ranked ahead, and then go up the chain from there.
yeah,
That's how it should be. But we're all human, and it's humans that are filling out these forms. These voting machines, these mail-in ballots, these emailing ballots, these text messages, however they do it. But in the end, you get these sports writers that have control over how these teams are ranked because it's the Associated Press. It's not coaches. It's not people that are actually in the game itself. It is media that is creating these rankings. Now, I will say there are teams where you find yourself getting them voted high in the rankings to start the year, but they just completely fall apart. And they're at this point just hoping to have their head above water enough to get into the big dance. And I'm talking specifically about one team. Matthew, do you know who I'm talking about?
who is
We're talking Sparty here. We're
it?
talking Michigan State. They were ranked number 4
Yeah,
to start the season. And you thought with such a veteran led roster that they would be able to come back and just make a run. That didn't happen. Right now, they're better than where their net rankings were going into last season's conference tournaments, but they are nowhere near where their expectation was for this coming into this season. So it is a lot of ebb and flow. But those sports writers that put Michigan State at number 4, it took them like 3-4 weeks of seeing them actually play games before Michigan State actually fell out of the top 25. So just again, it's the idea that they don't want to be proven wrong. But my goodness, Michigan State proved them wrong coming out of the starting gate. And now they're just hoping to get in the tournament.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And I'm sure you guys are out there saying, "Well, aren't you guys the media too?" Yes, but when's the last time you met someone in the media that's agreeing with these AP polls or the college football playoff polls with bias aside? With bias, of course, me and Ed are going to have the Longhorns and the Ducks at the top at every single sport there is, no matter how good or bad they are. But bias aside, when's the last time you've actually agreed with someone up there, and you're not. So that's our point of saying there is that yes, I get we're the media too, and I'm not even saying that we should have a vote, but I just don't agree with a lot of the things that they're doing up there on all levels, from college basketball to college football. And don't get us started on college football. There's a lot to be talked about there. But when it comes to these preseason pools and the bias early on, and yes, no, like Ed said, no one wants to be proven wrong, but something's got to give.
And I will say, Matthew and I, we are media, but we're not media that's being paid by the networks to push certain teams that our network is showing on a regular basis.
Yes,
So we are at a point where we can tell you exactly what we think, and we will 100% always.
yeah. We don't have that. Hold on, someone's talking in my ear. You know what? Actually, guys, Arizona, Michigan State deserves to be at the top. That's what they're telling me. That's what Ed's talking about there. But Me and Ed also talked about not too long ago of which conference is going to have the most going into March Madness. And, at the time, SEC and Big 12 were neck and neck. But now, I mean, on this bracketology, I'm seeing Big 12. I mean, Ed, what are you seeing there?
I'm seeing up to 9 teams out of the Big 12. Granted, the Big 12 has 16 teams in it,
Not 12.
which has never made sense to me. But we're looking at 9 teams: Houston, which is number one; Kansas, Iowa State, Baylor, BYU, Texas Tech, TCU. Those are locks. So you're already at 7. After that, you have Oklahoma and Texas. Kind of ironic considering that those are the 2 teams that are going to be leaving the Big 12 at
Yeah.
the end of this season. But they are teams that have good wins in conference. It is the absolute toughest conference in the country, and I will die on that hill. And in 3, you've got great rosters and great systems put in play that can play with anybody else in the country. I saw a stat recently where Texas has had 3 road wins in the Big 12. Only 2 other teams in the Big 12 had that. I mean, it is just so difficult to get through that league and league play. And just last night, Texas, they did fall to Baylor and Waco. And there is a lot of chatter about Texas getting bad calls after bad calls after bad calls. And the only one I'm going to mention here is when you have a player throw up a 3-pointer in the first half, in the first 10 minutes of the game, hits the 3-pointer, falls into the Baylor bench, not really falling into anybody, but just standing on the Baylor bench and like celebrating the fact that he hit the shot. He gets called for a technical. Nothing else happened on the play. He made a shot. He celebrated with the fist pump and like, oh yeah, let's go. And he gets a technical for that.
Bush League.
Bush League. That was terrible. That's just something you gotta have to handle in basketball. The fact that every basketball game is officiated differently, but that was an absolute egregious call, and that's all I'm going to mention about that Texas Baylor game.
Yeah, I mean, that call itself is horrendous in any college sport because if you know college sports, they are the most passionate, not only fan base, but athletes too. And so I just think that it's unfair to call something like that. But to add with you what you said about Oklahoma and Texas, you know how many SEC fans once college football ended, it was already over. So that season's over. So, Texas and Oklahoma are already part of the SEC, according to SEC fans, probably. So they're probably counting them as SEC schools in that if they make it to the March Madness tournament. But you said one team, Ed, and I know you're going to agree with me here as much as you probably hate to. A team that I see going far in this tournament is none other than Iowa State. They are looking very special. And in a conference like the Big 12, if your name is not Kansas or Houston right now, um, if you stand out, you're special. And I think Iowa State is that team that coming into the tournament, I feel like is really going to turn some heads. So that's a team that I plan on keeping my eye on.
They are a very physical team. In fact, about a week ago, you had Houston playing Iowa State. The fans came into that building looking for a basketball game, and a wrestling match broke out. It was just that physical, down low, all over the court. It was really fun to watch. But then again, that's another one of those different styles of play that you see in college basketball that you're not going to see in the NBA. Because goodness knows they don't know how to play defense in the NBA anymore.
Well, we talk about Houston and their defense and Iowa State, their physicality as well. It makes you think of the '90s Supersonics with Gary Payton, Sean Kemp, and just going at it. That was prime time basketball right there. Physicality at its greatest. I mean, Patrick Ewing and Scottie Pippen getting into it after he dunked over him. It's stuff like that. And gosh, I love it. I love it so much. And those two teams represent it. I would pay to see them in the tournament again. Which I mean, they may be facing each other, here with the Big 12 tournament, but in March Madness tournament, oh man, that's gonna be
Grab
another
your popcorn, y'all. Grab your popcorn.
prime time matchup. But uh, there's more news to talk about here, especially this last weekend. But first, I want to talk specifically about this show called Unfiltered. It's 2024. We have Super Tuesday that's happening right now as we speak throughout the country. You have the conservative movement is more ideological, diverse than ever. I feel like you cannot just agree on anything anymore. I'm not saying you have to agree with everything that someone else says, but there's just not a whole lot of jointness anymore. It seems like everything is constantly bumping heads, infighting threats to divide us. Unfiltered is a space where folks from all over the right can openly share their opinions and debate differences in a laid back and a friendly atmosphere environment. Join Britta. She's awesome. She's wonderful. And any of her special guests as they chat about everything from politics to culture, religion, and relationships. Catch Britta Unfiltered on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, or listen on Apple and Spotify. You don't have to have a subscription on Twitter or anything. Just search that show and you will find her. But guys, NFL Combine, this seems to be kind of a really sought out event to some, but it may also be redundant to others. And it kind of begs the question, well, is it necessary? We've seen a lot of film already with a lot of these players in college. Let's not forget, a lot of them got extra years due to COVID. So when you talk about guys like Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix, I mean, Bo Nix has a record for the most starts in college football ever. I mean, he's been there for 40 years. So it's like we've seen a lot of film on these guys. What more do they have to prove? But the combine does showcase some things that you may not see on the field, but to others, how much does it matter? If you'll all remember last year, CJ Stroud failed the cognitive test. What did CJ Stroud do this year? Oh, yeah, rookie of the year. Brought the Texans from a 3-win team to what? Oh, the playoffs. Oh, and they won in the first round. Man, that cognitive test really showed him, and that's what irritates me about some of the things that happen at the combine. And there's actually a drill that I'm probably going to get heat for that I think, in my this is just my opinion, is pointless. And that's the 40-yard dash. And I will tell you why, but I want to ask Ed, well, what events do you think matter the most or actually matter in the combine?
Actually, I think the drill that matters the most in almost every position on the field is the three cone drill.
Yep.
It's that back and forth. It's that explosiveness. It's that interior getting off the ball drill and that change of direction that you see off of it. Those are the things that matter when you get to Sundays. It isn't how fast can you run in your underwear in straight line speed. It is, while we'll get to it, uh, it's impressive, but it's not going to be the biggest translator of this is what is going to work on the field. Because when you look at players like Keon Coleman, we know he can play ball. We know he can do it. He's just not as I, I can say it, not as fast as some other players, but he is that's not what makes him a good football player. His ability to catch contested, to be able to have radius, to have concentration, to be a route runner, those are things that separate Keon Coleman from a lot of these other wide receivers. In fact, Keon Coleman had the fastest gauntlet time of anybody, but nobody talks about that. They only want to talk about, ooh, we did the stopwatch thing. And I'm super excited about what happened in the stopwatch thing, but that is not what I want to see in drills. And these drills, you see the hoop drill the for the interior lineman. You see the route tree for the wide receivers. You see the timing of throws, the correct the correct angle of the throw. You know, how much air, how much zip, you know, where on the field do you need that type of stuff? Can you throw the lollipop versus the 90 yards downfield, Joe Milton? That that is what I'm looking at. I'm looking at these things that may seem, you know, like they are not, you know, part of the overall 5 drills that every team does, but there are certain specific things that, like the 3 cone drill, that will show you when you're talking about 340-pound guys in a small space changing direction. Those are huge when it comes to those other drills. I feel like the 40-yard dash and those long bomb throws and those high jumps, the long jumps, they measure so very little, but they get such big ratings that it becomes a 4-day television show. I mean, Matthew, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I get that the 40-yard dash is probably the most drawn to event of all the events that unfold on the combine weekend, but it really has. It's kind of became that 4-day show that is more of a ratings thing than it is even to scout the players. I mean, I'm going to ask you this, Ed. When's the last time you saw David Bakhtiari do a vertical jump in a game? I'm going to answer that for you. Zero. You're not going to see an offensive lineman jump up in the air, as high as they can when they're blocking. Defensive linemen, okay, that's one thing as far as maybe trying to block a kick or block a throw, but the vertical leap means nothing in my opinion, especially for a lineman. It could for receivers possibly, but uh, the 40-yard dash. I'm just going to get this out right here. When have you ever seen in an NFL game a player, yes, there's a 3-point stance. I don't want to sound ignorant, tight end, lineman, okay. But let's talk about receivers here. When are you gonna see a receiver in a 3-point stance and a track stance running a route? Never. You're never gonna see that. So if you're gonna do a speed drill like this, besides your elusiveness cone drills, um, at least make it realistic because this literally means nothing. They're not running on a track, they're running on a football field. Okay. They're also running routes, they're not running a straight line. I mean, yes, if they get a ball on a screenplay, possibly, but make it more realistic. I feel like the 40-yard dash, how they have it now, is irrelevant. It's just more of a showing ratings thing. But there's still some excitement to it, and Ed's going to talk about that excitement here in a couple seconds. But I think that me and him agree that when it comes to certain events, such as a 40-yard dash, doesn't really mean anything because, for the most part, we've seen your tape in college. We see that you could be a quick back or you could be someone that is a down the field deep threat. And well, this next guy that I'm going to let Ed talk about, he's a little bit of both. But Ed, you want to
Yeah,
talk about something that happened over the weekend?
yeah. I had a wonderful time actually watching the 40-yard dash. I'm not saying that I was not going to watch it because that's what it's there for. They put it on the screen for me to watch, and I'm going to watch it. Well, there's a wide receiver from the University of Texas that just down the street from me that I was watching, and by the from the time that he was in the starting gate to the time that he finished his 40-yard dash, he was flying. He was so fast. And he's a guy that has great hands. He is a great route runner. He can really get those contested catches and break tackles down the field. And that was Adonai Mitchell. He ran a 4.34 40-yard dash. And Then about 4 hours later, was it, Matthew, that you texted me to make sure that I was watching when his teammate Xavier Worthy was on the block to make sure that I was watching it. Matthew texted me because I had things going on. Well, Xavier Worthy went out, didn't do a 4.34, didn't do a 4.30, didn't even do a 4.25. That dude ran a 4.21. That is a record for the combine. And all the years that they've been doing it, nobody has been faster than Xavier Worthy out of the University of Texas at the combine. And it just wowed the crowd because remember, the crowd is being allowed into the combine uh, this year, and it was the wide receivers on Saturday. So there was a much larger group there. I think it was about 16,000 that were in the stands to watch this take place. And it just lit the entire world on fire. Just as much fire as he left back at the 10-yard mark. Because once he hit that 10-yard mark, it was sailing. There was no stopping that dude. And some players will run through and kind of slow down. He's like, no, I saw that I beat this record. I am running a complete lap around the stadium because that's just what I'm going to do. Now, he didn't participate in the other drills that took place because he had already planned to not do that. He wanted to be there to show off his speed on television, and that's exactly what he did. The other part that he was able to do there. And it's something that isn't shown on the television show of the combine. It's the interviews. It's the interviews with the teams for these prospects that maybe they're going to be a little bit lower based upon what their tape shows, but their IQ is much higher and can help out at the NFL level in a different way than what college is showing. Because we all know college is a different ball game than the NFL.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I don't even know how his cleats even stayed on his feet because they were probably melted to rubber at that point and how fast he was going. But this is what makes it so fascinating. At the same time, I get that, I am dogging on the 40-yard dash itself, but it is still a fun thing to watch. But yeah, I had texted Ed because for the most part, for a couple hours, it was all about Adonai Mitchell and how impressive he looked, especially in his 40-yard dash. And that's what it was like, the talk of the town. And then Xavier Worthy had, well, other intentions. And how awesome it was it to see, two Texas guys right there at the top. And yes, they're both known for their speed, but I feel like they've really shown a lot more as what they can do as players. And they showed it on their film, on their tape. But I agree with Ed. These interviews, they are very important, and I think they should be shown. I really do. I've always felt that way. And me and Ed will we remember this. It was when Texas was in the college football playoffs, and everyone wanted to be there to interview Arch Manning. And here's Quinn Ewers, the starting quarterback, might I add, by himself. Me and Ed would have killed to be there to interview this guy because, well, that's what we love. It had nothing to do with that Ed being a Texas fan. It's we are sports fans, and there are so many questions that can be asked to these guys, not only to learn their character, but to learn their mindset. You ever talk to an NFL quarterback, shoot, any actually athlete, but their memory is insane. You'll see it in the NFL now, like Amon-Ra St. Brown on the Lions. He'll tell you every single wide receiver that was drafted before him. These guys have an incredible memory, and they'll wow you with a lot of the things they have to say. And these interviews are so important. So I really feel like if the NFL Network, you're listening, I would play those because I think those interviews are important for the public. Yes, we're not drafting them, but if our team does, we're a fan base. We want to know this investment we just got as well of who's now on our team. Yes, we could see every Saturday we tuned in what they did on the college football field. but how are they off the field? What is their mindset like? And just those are the things I like to hear. So I agree with Ed when it comes to that.
Are y'all like me where watching the interview that John Gruden used to do where he was breaking down quarterbacks was way more interesting than watching the 40-yard dash? That was such an interesting show to me before John Gruden had that whole text message thing that we're not going to get into. But the fact that he broke down film and broke down each quarterback one by one every year, that was so much more impactful for me as a fan to see them break down a play, to see them look at their mistakes through the season and say, no, I should have done this. I realize that that is something that did not go well for me, so I'm going to make it better when I get into the league, and I'm going to watch the film enough to make sure that I don't do that. Those type of things were way more interesting to me. Now, for players that did not participate in the combine, which the three that are most notable were Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and Caleb Williams. Now, Caleb Williams did show up, but he just showed up for interviews and to be interviewed by the press to to I guess play that dog and pony show
Yeah.
because they are all expecting to have their workouts at their pro day on their home college campus, which everybody else that was at the combine is going to be at the pro day on their own college campus.
Yeah.
So that's I had a bit of an issue with it, but Matthew, what were your thoughts when you saw that?
It was just like a PR, appearance pretty much. Yeah, the pro day now seems to be more of a bigger deal for scouts than the combine is. You are going to, yeah, they're pretty much home stadium where they played college at, and you're getting to see, several of these players showcase their abilities, and they're going to do more drills there. Doesn't mean they're going to do all of them, but uh, it's kind of hard because I think the NFL is kind of in a tight spot when it comes to that. What do we want to push more, the combine or their pro days? But I think scouts they prefer the pro days more because they're more focused on what is happening there instead of having to bounce all around with hundreds of players at the combine. So I think the pro days are more important. It's more centered, but yeah, Caleb Williams, him and Drake May, they've pretty much solidified themselves as being the 1 and 2 picks there. Um, so it's almost like they didn't really have to show up. It must be nice to kind of control that part of it where Caleb Williams, is like, oh, I'm going to be number 1 pick most likely. So I don't even have to do anything out here really except show up. That's what my agent's telling me to do. So that's kind of how
Mm-hmm.
I feel. He has done great in college. How he'll be in the pros, we will see. We've seen many come to the NFL with high expectations from college, and well, they didn't live up to it.
Now, one thing that, if I could backtrack a second on pro days, there's one thing that scouts get when they go to the home field and do the pro days is they get to talk to everybody that's there, not just the player coming to them, but they are able to talk to all the coaches, all the other players, all the staff, everybody in and around the program itself to know more about the player that they are going to draft. They are getting more information there than they are at the combine, which leads us to that whole conversation that we just had about it being an NFL Network TV show, which gets us all excited when we see some spectacular things like a 4.21 40-yard dash or a 225-pound bench press being done 35 times just consecutively. Those are astounding feats to have happen, but they do get more information from being at the facility because there's more people to gather information from.
Yep, yep, absolutely. So I mean, when the pro days are happening, if you're a fan, it's one thing to keep an eye on more because you may see more film on that. If you're wanting to watch a more specific player with a combine, it's kind of hit or miss on who they're going to show, and also a lot of them did not participate. But of those who did participate, some of the big names: J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, as far as the top quarterbacks go. Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't really do much on the wide receiver side. This is going to be a first round where we're probably going to see a record number of quarterbacks and receivers taken all in the first round. I don't even think there's going to be another position that gets drafted in the first round at this rate. But, I am trying to figure out where the heck did JJ McCarthy's name really just come up the last week. He is just really skyrocketed on where he's going to be drafted. And I don't really know what the heck he did. I'm not saying he's bad whatsoever, but going into the combine, it was almost, the number one quarterback's going to be Caleb Williams and Drake May. Then after that, most likely Jaden Daniels and JJ McCarthy was right around there. But now it's like, oh no, JJ McCarthy is going to be number three easily. And I'm like, what did he do at the combine that really struck people into this JJ hype?
And it is a matter of NFL teams overvaluing QBs. That it's simple as that. Because going to the combine, the projections I had seen was that McCarthy would have been end of the first round, then maybe somebody stretched at 15 to get him. But now we're seeing reports of the Giants at number 6 are going to take him straight up when they just paid Daniel Jones 2 years ago.
Yeah.
What? I don't. I. This is something that is befuddling me, and not to mention all the other draft stuff going on, and we'll get into that on some later shows. But to have JJ McCarthy just out of nowhere, poof, I'm here. I'm going to be a top 10 pick just because I play for Jim Harbaugh and know how to throw a check down. That's not NFL quarterback play. I mean, if you're looking at guys that had good throws, if you're using what they put in the combine on film and watch those, I thought Spencer Rattler had better throws than what JJ McCarthy did. But JJ McCarthy, like I said, he played for Harbaugh, who's now going to be in the NFL. Is he getting a pass for that? Is he getting a pass for having 7 offensive linemen that are going to be drafted in this class, as well as a running back that led, I think, broke the Michigan record for yardage? I mean, how is JJ McCarthy supposed to prove that he is the man that's worthy of a top 10 pick when he was, I'm not going to say he was being carried, but the offensive system was not there to showcase JJ McCarthy whatsoever.
No, not at all. And we know that this is a chess match. It really is between GMs, franchises. But one thing that's I really find crazy is today's Tuesday. Okay, I'm sure you guys are watching this and it's Wednesday, but it's Tuesday when we film this, and the last time the quarterbacks did anything on the combine was what, Saturday, and we have already seen. I mean, today it's been what, 4 days, 3 4 days, and now I just got a report just earlier that Michael Penix Jr. has now jumped up into an early first round pick all of a sudden. I'm pretty sure it was the Athletic that reported that, and I'm like, why didn't we get that report the other day? Did he do something at the combine? Did he do something after the combine? Did he open a car door for an old lady? What was it that within those 3 to 4 days transpired for him to now be bumped all the way up there? It's like I'm starting to think that people are just throwing these things out, hoping that they will bait someone. It's all just a chess game, in my opinion.
Partly it is a chess game, partly from the agent's perspective, partly from the player's perspective, partly from the GM's perspective. Because we remember just 1 year ago, There was a quarterback that was definitely going to be picked in top three and wound up being in the second round. That is the nature of this whole scouting, player evaluation idea. That is what is happening at this point between now and the draft at the end of April. That is what we're going to see. Just fluctuation back and forth. It is what it is at this point, but it's a fun ride to watch how these GMs, how these player evaluation people make their living off this 6 week period, and it's fun to try and keep up with it. But if you think too hard about it, it will make your head spin.
Yes, absolutely it will. But the combine wasn't the only big thing that happened. This last week in the last couple of days, we did have breaking news yesterday of Jason Kelsey from the Philadelphia Eagles is calling it quits after 13 years, and he is retiring from the NFL. And hats off to him. He had an incredible career and will go down as one of the best centers to play in the game. He really he made the center position, I feel like, relevant again. Uh, he he's an amazing athlete, especially for his size. And he had an incredible press conference to, end his career to retire. And the NFL will miss him. Jason Kelsey was a tremendous athlete and a tremendous guy that will be missed not only in Philadelphia but throughout the NFL. I know that if you hear the last name Kelsey, and if you're a Swifty, all you know is Travis, but he does have a brother who is very talented, and his name is Jason Kelsey.
Yeah, and Jason Kelsey, he is he is Philadelphia. He's the so-called mayor of Philadelphia. There has not been an offensive lineman that has been so beloved more than any quarterback that the team's ever had than Jason Kelsey is to Philadelphia. There is during his retirement press conference yesterday, he actually gave pointers to other players that are playing in Philadelphia how to get that fan base on your side. It was a step by step account. Do everything from the ground up, just as gritty as you can, and leave nothing in your own tank by the end of it, and have it all be about the city. That will endear you to that Philadelphia fan base. But there is one thing that he said that I really wanted to point on, and that is, and this steps away, this speaks to him about stepping away from the world of football. We wind up having these retirements where people come back out of retirement and do all this other stuff. This is a guy that his body has taken enough punishment. It is time for the next chapter in his life, and he knows it. He's got a beautiful wife and three daughters. It is he specifically, there is nothing better in this world than to be a father, and that is something that there are not enough players putting themselves in that position to be a father figure, even though he's been a brotherly figure for not only his brother, his teammates, and the city of Philadelphia. It's time for him to take that next step and be a present father. And that is just something that I wish him the absolute best on, because it's something that I think he can be a role model to other players looking into that next stage of life.
Absolutely, and that was the one thing that really stood out to me during his press conference too. And I'm really glad that he mentioned that and said that. Philadelphia, known as the city of brotherly love, and he's the definition of that. I don't think you can ask any NFL player that doesn't like him. Every NFL player, every fan, they respect him, they like him. He's just a stand up guy, and yeah, I mean he's going out on top. And I don't mean that they won the Super Bowl or anything like that. He went out when he could still, He probably could still play a little bit, but he's banged up. It's similar to like a catcher's position in MLB. He's the center. He has endured a lot, but what he's doing now, and I want to be a full time father and do be a family man. That is amazing. We need more people like that out there. So, just huge congrats to him.
And for a little bit more information about that retirement and Jason Kelsey's penultimate decision yesterday, we do have a story on American Daily Press that did follow that. So go check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our great writers, you may know him, Ed Smith. He wrote this article, so go ahead and check it out, guys. But there's also a lot of more news that happened. The Denver Broncos have announced that they will be releasing their starting quarterback, Russell Wilson, and it is not going to be cheap. It is going to come very, very expensive with an $85 million cap hit. You remember earlier this year we remembered Jimbo Fisher. He had a buyout at Texas A&M, and oh my, did that seem a lot? Oh no, this is even way more. This is pretty much an $85 million buyout, and it kind of just makes me wonder: was this possibly the worst trade maybe ever, or and all, not just the trade. Well, I know Ed has one at number one, but not only was this such a bad trade, but they extended him right away. So it's almost like a GM organization. Was this one of the worst kind of deals there is? We've talked about the Deshaun Watson one, and I know it's kind of yet to be determined a little bit more. But I know Ed how he feels. Was it Herschel Walker or yes? And we that one Ricky Williams. Let's trade all of our draft picks. I mean, there is a lot that we have seen over time, but Ed, this is pretty bad.
It is absolutely horrifying as a as an NFL franchise because even with the Jimbo Fisher thing, with his buyout, it did not affect the rest of the team. This absolutely squashes the rest of the roster into a salary cap that, yes, it got $13 million more than what they expected, but it's not that $13 million is not going to be enough to counteract an $85 million cap hit. That is that is basically telling your fan base that we're going to suck this year. Just hang on. We've got to get past this and we're going to start from scratch. And if there's a coach that I trust to start a team from scratch, it's going to be Sean Payton because he's done it already. He did it in New Orleans when that continued to be a joke of a franchise with very few successful seasons before he got there. You get him the right you get him the right quarterback, there's nothing that they won't be able to accomplish. And that's just the way that he builds his franchises. And I would certainly trust that he'll be able to do that in Denver. They've just got to get past this. But Matthew, let me ask you a quick question though. Has Russell Wilson played himself out of the Hall of Fame?
It's borderline, honestly. It is borderline because you can't really judge things that, like fully off, like off the field. He seems to kind of almost be like a locker room cancer. He has done some tremendous things, but this is really going to put him as like a fringe Hall of Famer.
Do you think that it would be more of a lock of him being in the Hall of Fame if it wasn't for the worst play call in Super Bowl history?
Yeah, I do. I mean, or sorry, not World Series. Two Super Bowls is a lot better than one. I will say that, but that's not always everything. As you know, Aaron Rodgers has one Super Bowl, but he's a shoe in Hall of Famer with the success he's had on the field, just everything that he's done there. But Russell Wilson is not that level.
But to be that level of player where a team is willing to give up number ones, number twos, number fours, and then have to sign him to an extension and take on uh, and and take and give away a quarterback in Drew Lock
Yeah.
for all that for one player that you are releasing before the extension kicks in. That's the point here. Before the extension kicks in, and it's not because of him doing high knees on a plane all the way to Europe. It's not a matter of him being a locker room cancer or thinking that he's better than anybody else that's in the building. This is about him being on the field.
Yeah.
He has not lived up to the prospect of who we thought Russell Wilson was. Does this mean um, that Pete Carroll was that much better of a head coach than anybody else? That he could make Russell Wilson look this good to where they want to have a trade like this? I think it does. It makes Pete Carroll go into the NFL Hall of Fame, but it is something that I don't think Russell Wilson is a shoe in at this point because of the way that he's played these past 2 years and the fact that there was not a victory in that second Super Bowl because of the worst play call in NFL history.
Yeah, and I mean, early reports that I've seen since his release is that he wants to be a starter. He wants to be QB1 on the next team he's on, and it's like, well, duh, because do you want your career to end like this? The last thing that anyone will ever know is that how horrendous you were on the field to the point to where a team pretty much would rather go into debt than have you play on their team more. So I mean, that kind of just shows where he's at right now, and yeah, I the Broncos they had that mindset of wanting to rebuild. That's why they did that whole trade, but it may not go down as the worst trade, but it could be up there as one of the worst franchise mistakes financially because of what's unfolding.
I'm going to say that it wasn't the worst trade. The Herschel Walker trade is still going to be worse because the Herschel Walker trade catapulted 3 Super Bowl victories. This trade absolutely does not catapult 3 Super Bowl victories for the Seattle Seahawks.
No.
So that's why I'm saying the Herschel Walker trade is worse than this one. Uh, but it's just so difficult. But Matthew, I will ask if you have any initial reaction as to where Russell Wilson would be a good fit to go.
It's funny that you say that because a couple years ago, when things were kind of sounding not too optimistic for him in Seattle, I was like, I'd love to have my Steelers. I'd love to have him on my Steelers team. I thought that he kind of brought that not only as that veteran side, a guy who has won a Super Bowl, but uh, I think that he would fit in well. But now I couldn't tell you where he would really belong the best. Because we've seen how he is with guys like Cortland Sutton, Jerry Judy, which are two great receivers. It's like, well, which team is he going to be able to go to that have receivers not only of that same caliber but better that he's going to succeed in? I can't really think of any right now, and uh, I mean, I don't know about you where you think he'd fit best in, but I don't really see him really fitting in the best anywhere.
I'm thinking that of a team that would be a better fit for him rather than him fitting into that team. And looking at it from the franchise point of view as opposed to the player point of view. And I think that team is the New England Patriots.
Yeah,
Because at this point, they need a starting quarterback. They could use Russell Wilson as a cheap alternative because he's got money.
yeah,
Why does he need money for? They could use him as a cheap alternative to go ahead and use the draft capital that they had this year to help build that depleted roster from the ground up with a new head coach, with a GM that's not the head coach, and really work the system to try and put all those pieces together and use Russell Wilson as a bridge before you get into next season, which you're still going to have high quality quarterbacks coming out next year that you could draft early on if you're still in the same boat next year as you are this year. I think that would make sense, but that's just me looking at it from a 10,000 foot view on the franchise side.
Yeah, I mean, then if that's the case, what would New England do with that number three pick? Trade it? Would they draft Marvin Harrison Jr. or offensive line? I mean,
Offensive line.
yeah.
That absolutely. If you are going to build a team from the ground up, you have to start with the line first.
Well, if that's the case, I'm trading that number three pick with someone who wants to move up, then get more draft capital because an offensive. I mean, right now I don't think they have offensive line slated until the Chargers pick. I mean, so
Which is just after that.
yeah, so
So
you
uh,
could
trade back a couple, get Joe Alt, and add some more depth in the second, third round.
Yeah, I mean, because you got Atlanta, who I'm sure would love to move up if they don't go through with Kirk Cousins, which I think is a report happening right now. But uh, yeah, there's a lot of people that would love to move up in the top five because now with this JJ McCarthy talk, who knows who's even going to be available after 4 or 5. So we know who the first two are going to be. I think that seems pretty obvious there. But
Yeah.
what it's going to be like after that, it's going to be crazy. So yeah, I mean, I could kind of see that happening. But I before we go, I kind of hate to end the show on this. There was some unfortunate news that happened over the weekend, and that was the passing of Chris Mortensen, who has so much respect uh, with what he has done as a reporter, not only for ESPN but for the NFL. Um, Ed, I know remembers him, and I'll actually let Ed talk a little bit more here. But Chris Mortensen, he is an OG. I'll say that he has been around for a while, and he's done some great things for the NFL. And it is unfortunate of his passing. It is sad to see, but we pray for his family and for himself also. But Ed, you want to talk us through some of your fond moments of Chris Mortensen?
When I was a kid, we had the NFL Today. That was your morning beginning show for the NFL. ESPN was still kind of in its infancy, trying to figure things out, how to be a 24-hour network, that whole thing. And the NFL Today would start every show was with Brent Musburger stating, "You're looking live at whatever stadium that they're showing on the screen." For the rest of that show, it felt more or less, and I could be misremembering this because I was very young at the time. I I remember it being kind of like what we're doing here, kind of talking about things that we know that we anticipate happening in the game. Chris Mortensen came along and basically created a job that did not exist in the NFL media landscape. He created the insider, and the insider that had all the contacts, talked to everybody, got information from everybody that it wasn't supposed to be out yet, but the contacts felt it necessary to give him the scoop on any news that was happening. And from there, you got more more of these insider type media personalities that weren't there before. And now you have media personalities for every college team, football, baseball, basketball, hockey, every NFL team has their own individualized media insider. Every uh, front office has their own media insider. Every level has a media insider. And it's all because we wanted more as fans. We wanted to see more and get more information. And that's where Chris Mortensen became such a huge part of Sunday Morning Countdown on ESPN with Chris Berman and Jackson. you know, every every single Sunday, getting that extra bit of information right before kickoff. It was just such a treat. It was such a ooh, I wonder what's happening now. Ooh, I even though you see the ticker across the bottom of the screen, hearing Mortensen tell it, that gave legitimacy to what the news actually was. He is so well respected and was such a mentor to so many other personalities that we kind of take for granted now. You know, uh, Schefter, he has become what Chris Mortensen was, but he's a little bit different guy.
Yeah.
Mortensen was very much a okay. You're saying this, but let me tell you why this is happening this way.
Yeah.
Schefter, he'll do that, but he has his own spin on it. It's his own thing. Mortensen just kind of came into everybody's living room a as a as somebody that just knows everything and wants you to make sure that you know it too. And it was such a pleasure to watch him do that for so long. He just retired. He had moved to Arkansas from the Atlanta area. He was enjoying life, and unfortunately, this happened. He's at the age of 72. He had been through hell with cancer treatments over the past 10 years, and he was on the other side of it. This was not expected, and it's just it's difficult to think of the NFL without Chris Mortensen for so many people. Even though many people have moved on from him, his presence has still in the industry, and I hope it stays there for a very long time.
Yes, I agree. You already brought up one name with Adam Schefter, and I'll talk about the big three major sports. But in NFL, you do have the Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport. In the MLB, you have Passan and Ken
Peter
Rosenberg.
King,
Yeah,
yeah,
Peter King, and NBA Woj and Shams. Those guys would not be here if it wasn't for Chris Mortensen and pretty much him pioneering this job, like Ed said, that was not a job before. And he was so well trusted with the contacts he had and the information that he made these things public live on TV and made it kind of more personable. This is before the age of Twitter, any social media. It was your television screen, right then and there. And we have different versions of it now with those names I talked about. NFL, you have Jay Glazer, who will talk about injuries, that who's in, who's out, stuff like that. It's almost like a tree, but at the bottom, the foundation was him. So it is very unfortunate and sad of his passing, but he will be well remembered with pioneering this job title, pretty much this job position that was not there before. But that is about all we have today, folks. There was a lot that transpired this last weekend, and there's a lot more that's going to continue to transpire, especially with NFL free agency. It's going to be bananas. And of course, March Madness, like we've been talking about. So stay tuned to that. We will have hopefully live updates of things that are happening as they transpire. Try to give you all the best information that we can right then and there. So you continue to hit that like and subscribe button. Really appreciate that. Share these videos, and of course, drop in the comments your hot takes, maybe your opinions as well of the NFL Combine. 40-yard dash, is it even relevant? Is the combine itself necessary? And of course, drop in your prediction. You never know. You could throw in any team right now in the March Madness of who you think's going to win, and they could win. You just don't know. So go ahead and drop that in the comments as well, guys. But we appreciate all that you guys do, and we will continue to give you our very best. But until next time, guys, we are round in third, and we are headed.